Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Silver Tears Tarot and welcome to today's reading. Today is going to be the Outlook reading for the month of March. So here we are, somehow already in the month of March. And so we've had some pretty interesting things happening. I think it's apt that we did yesterday's reading completely on communication because it's been something that's come up an awful lot across the course of this year so far. So let's take a look at what March has to offer. We're taking a look at the energy of the month. It is going to be a general reading for this collective, so won't resonate with everyone, shouldn't resonate with everyone, as I always say. However, if it resonates with you, take a look. Take a look at some of the other readings because they're all very much connected. You may even want to subscribe, and then be sure to like so that if it has helped you or given you some insights that you have, that you're giving someone else that opportunity. So when you hit like, it basically it shows up in the feeds for people who watch similar things, which will be helpful because then they'll see something that has helped you. So we're going to go ahead and jump in and look at kind of we're going to go with the energetic background or energetic and emotional backdrop for the month of March. And so it's a wide stretch. You know, we're looking at not just the energy. Usually we're looking at kind of the energy of right now. And what we're looking at here is a little bit broader. So we're looking at the month of March. So we see Two of Pentacles. This looks like things may actually start to kind of, I want to say like straighten up and fly right. Like there's a sense of, okay, with the Ace of Cups in the reverse, this is why. So this is more of it feels very buttoned up. It feels very buttoned up and buttoned down. This is organized energy. It is getting things in order, but it also is kind of, it has this energy of a little bit of suppression of the emotional. And I feel like that's a desire to, good luck, a desire to suppress that emotional. But then with the Queen of Cups coming out, I was like, this doesn't feel like they just can, or you just can. Whoever wants to suppress this emotion so that you can do a better job of being organized or keeping balance, like I understand that reducing the number of variables might make things simpler, but it's not necessarily going to be an option, especially not when there's this much love bubbling up to the surface and it feels like springtime. So there's that feeling again. I think we saw it come up in the communication reading yesterday. And so the thing about the springtime feeling, it doesn't talk about when, even though we are getting into spring in the northern hemisphere here in March. That's not the point of that so much as the way it feels when something blooms that has been overwintering. This is that feeling. The Queen of Cups has that feeling of it's unconditional love, but it especially feels like the blooming of it. And it's like trying to keep the emotional doors shut in light of that is it's going to be very challenging. So I would say if this is you, roll with it. It could be both of you because it's in the energetic backdrop. It could be beyond just the both of you. It could be something that's kind of, you'll see it in the overall society. There's a desire to kind of reduce that emotion, but there's so much emotion coming up that this is very difficult to do. And yet this strong desire, almost a need, a priority to keep things balanced. So there's part of what's coming in for the month. Okay, so this is like something that's been requested for some time. So it's a time of looking for some wisdom. So this is about not asking for wisdom from someone else so much as it's the Hermit card. It's going off by yourself. I like to say going off in that thinking cave and really just doing some just doing searching of not just the soul, but research that is kind of like independent research around what it is that you need to resolve. So it isn't always looking into yourself, but a great deal of it is. There may be some research, there may be some reaching out to others for recommendations or advice, but the real work happens in the wisdom you gain from yourself and from your higher self. Now, we also have the Knight of Cups. For the first time, we're seeing something that really suggests like there may not be as much communication or movement toward communication during the month of March, but I feel like it's related to this Hermit card because I feel like everyone like has, it's like a boxing match, and everyone has gone back into their corner after the maelstrom of energy that has been January and February. I'm not saying that no one's going to get contact. I'm sure that some of you will, and it may even show up in some of the readings, but this is a tendency not to, or a tendency to, it's like retracting so that you can come back. Or I need to go, it's just like that boxing match. You go into your corners, respective corners, for a time, and then the bell rings and you come out again. So this feels like it's the end of the match and it's time for you to go back to your respective corners for a moment. I don't know if it's the whole month, but what really strikes me about it more than the timing is the nature of it. So it's like, it feels like going back in your corner, but it also feels kind of like preparing for that bell to ring again. And here we are with the preparation once again. There are a lot of different ways to go about this, but also a lot of energy that kind of springs up. And a challenging feeling with the Lovers in reverse. So I'll go through these individually, because I think I just kind of summarized it. But the Three of Wands talks about it. It's about kind of this feeling of a jumping off point, or preparation for that bell ringing, like I was talking with the Knight of Cups. And it's a communication sort of energy, but it's also a vulnerability energy, a creativity energy. This is everyone kind of going back in their corners, taking a load off, but also doing some work. There is this feeling that, I think this is only part of the, I don't feel like this is the whole month. I feel like this is part of what happens, because this Ace of Wands is about what happens when that bell rings. So this is having a healthier level of energy, I think. So instead of having that tired feeling, there's been this incredibly tired feeling of just not quite being able to ever get caught up, and always feeling like you're overwhelmed. And this is a feeling of having a moment to catch some of that energy. And I feel like that's what happens here in the Hermit Cave. But also with the Three of Wands, sets you for something, sets you, like, it makes it possible that when this bell does ring and you have the opportunity to utilize that energy, that you have some some kind of a leg up on how it gets used, or how it gets pointed, or there is something that is already in motion when that bell rings. Okay. Now, here's the tricky bit, and this is, I think, part of what you're working on in your respective hermit caves, and it is something that needs to be worked on individually. So if they're real quiet right now, or they're not being vulnerable, they've retracted, they've reblocked, they've re-ghosted, they never showed up in the first place, but the energy at least seems to calm down. Here's what they're off doing, and you should also be off doing. So we'll get to your focus over here for the month, but here we already have something coming out as far as there being a lot of options out there, and it's time to kind of figure out the direction that you want to focus. So the next thing that comes after the Seven of Cups, because it's a progression, is the Eight of Cups, and that's about the quest for what the thing is, that you're really narrowing it down from the Seven of Cups, which is options, paths, different ways that you can go. With the Eight of Cups, it's a matter of going on the quest to figure out what that happiness looks like. And that Nine of Cups is that happiness. Then, of course, the Ten of Cups is what are you going to do when you come in contact with that? And so the 8, 9, and 10 of Cups have been really big. And if you watch the previous readings, if you've been on the channel, this is all familiar to you. But if you're new, that is one of the things that has really come out as a lesson for both of you. So this is a matter of almost setting you up for a level of learning that lesson. And I say a level because I think you have to learn it on multiple levels. And that's part of why it seems like some of these things cycle around and you're like, I've seen this before. Why do I have to relearn this lesson? You probably did. Now you're learning next level version of that lesson. One of the reasons that this is an elevated level, or one of the ways in which this is an elevated level, is the energy behind this Lovers card coming in the reverse. So the Lovers is about this bond, and it's also about this choice. So choices around this bond. Here it's a matter of almost feeling like there is no choice, or feeling like so many of those choices are cut off that it's difficult to say that most of these options are available. But in reality, more of those options are available to you than you may be seeing at this time. And there may be a little bit of like self-limitation going on there. I feel like you are probably going to be able to utilize. It's like there needs to be a cooling down period after the madness that was January and February, and after that this choice starts to feel more like a choice. It's like swelling has to go down, and after that this feels more like this goes into the reverse. So we figured out by now we can't walk away from the bond, or we can't just make it go away. But it's about, what do you do with it? How do you manage it? And what do you do from here? There are choices, but it sometimes feels like there are not. So right now it feels like they're not. And this is an area of focus where your person will utilize that as something to kind of they'll use it as leverage to walk away from it within their mind. So I feel like they're going to make another attempt to do that, but they're not going to feel like that's really an option. They get magnetized back. So we see this tendency not to communicate, but then we've also got the Princess of Cups. So for those of you who received the botched apology, and for sure some of you did, because I definitely got some pretty interesting notes about that. For those of you who received the botched apology that was followed by, I don't know, immediate ghosting or immediate, it was like this vulnerable sort of communication, but it wasn't very well done, and it just kind of resulted in then you feeling more stressed and difficult about things than you had even before. This is that energy kind of still being there. So this is a nagging sense in them that they need to accomplish something. They need to tell you something. They need to make something feel a certain way, but they don't want to have the communication or get vulnerable. So that's an age-old issue with these folks. I mean, we see that with these readings all the way back to when I came on here. It was part of the reason I had to come on here, because it was like I was running into so many people that were getting similar readings, and I realized I need to be getting this out to more than one person at a time, but with the Princess of Cups, it is very much there's a compulsion to get this communication to you, but it's a gentle communication, and I feel like it is small, which is consistent with what we've seen. Remember yesterday we saw it could still be a botched apology, but it definitely seems like whatever it is, the communication is smaller than you hoped for, or than they thought they were going to deliver. So it's a little bit like disappointing in that sense. Doesn't necessarily fix things in the conversation or at the moment, but again, it may still lay some good groundwork for doing so, even if that's not how you feel like the conversation went. So just keep that in mind. And this is that uncertainty feeling. Sometimes it comes across as like a imposter syndrome. In this case, it's not quite imposter syndrome, but it is certainly, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure about my place in this. I'm not sure if I am important enough to you. And this is probably more no, this is very shared. It's very shared. I was going to say it's you, but it's both of you. It's that feeling of you both have this feeling that you're not important enough to the other person to be able to do what you are wanting to do, whatever that means. And I think it takes many different forms, but it's that feeling of not necessarily a lack of self-worth, but a lack of belief that someone else holds you in high regard. And I feel like they do. I feel like they revere you. Revere is the word that comes up, but I heard a great quote the other day, that reverence tends to fill up a room. And this is the thing that causes them to want to sort of bail and ghost, and that's what makes them run, is that feeling that it's that filling up the room feeling, and they don't feel like they can handle the presence of it. But here we have a repeat of that Queen of Cups reinforcing this other Queen of Cups over here. This bubbling up emotion is not to be trifled with. So even though we see a movement toward stability and balance, it's almost like that's a really good, well-timed sort of movement, because there is this emotion bubbling up that feels like it could kind of knock things off balance. And mixed in with this Ace of Wands passion, this could get kind of interesting this month. So let's see what else you need to know about the course of the month. Maybe it's not all about communication, or maybe there's a time that it's not about communication, and then you see them unlocking some things, because that's almost what it feels like there. But I won't go out and say that's the only message coming in through here. It's definitely one of them. Yesterday we looked at communication, like I said, quite conveniently. We learned that reaching out might create a setback for you, but you weren't told that talking to them was inherently bad. Just to be careful because you might be more, I don't know, susceptible to their charms than you realize. Let's see what I dropped. Hierophant, I was feeling this one over here. So the Hierophant over here is this hermit in the upright does not necessarily imply that they don't want to listen to someone else, but this is about getting advice from within yourself or about the most important information coming from within yourself, and that spiritual guidance, while useful from other sources, may not be the best source for either of you right now. This is a time of self-reflection and lone consideration. Oops. Let's see here. And we know they hunger for the communication, but they're looking like they're watching. They feel like they're watching themselves. This Judgment card often comes through feeling like a bird's eye view that you get all of a sudden over your whole life. And your person feels like they're having a bird's eye view over their life. They don't necessarily always like what they see, but it is absolutely helping to define their actions at this point. And their actions, again, reflect with this Hermit energy. It's a matter of getting some things together. I feel like this is solitary work that is very much needed right now. I know they hunger for the communication. And if they communicate with you, and remember, you are urged to be gentle, but also keep them, what did I say? I said something to someone recently that amounted to keep them at arm's length. You don't need to make the noise from where you're standing. Just kind of keep doing what you're doing. And when they come in, you hold them at arm's length. It's not anything other than gentle, but it is also not engaging on the same level. They may not come in the same way, though. With the Hermit card in the reverse, the way that it is, it may... remember, we saw in a previous reading that they're basically a little different every time. This is going to enable them to overcome some difficult things within themselves, and to figure out how not to bow to that pressure to hit send. It happens very quickly, and sometimes that's not necessarily a good thing. So it's enjoyable when you see their name on your notifications, but it's not so enjoyable when all of a sudden what happens next is really disappointing. Like, there's a sense of disappointment, but then for their side, it's like a sense of the spying having paid off. But it's also like, instead, they were supposed to memorize something and they just wrote it down and hid it someplace where they could see it. It's got that kind of feeling to it with the Queen of Pentacles. Strong sense of having to realign within the self. This is true on both sides, but I think it comes out, I think it manifests pretty differently for both of you. So you start to have places where you've got conflicts within yourself come into stark relief. I don't even necessarily get the sense that it's coming out like secrets coming out and it's bad and now you have damage control, and I don't think it's like that. I mean, some of you may have situations like that, but I think it's more like you just know that's coming and you have to figure out how you're going to address that at the time that it happens. I feel like you come up with a solution, though. And so this is getting over a hump for both of you, but this feels a little bit more pertinent for you, or stronger in your energy, or the thing that happens for you, because it comes across a little differently for both of you, but the thing that happens in your life is a little bit more of, it's a larger fixture in your life. When it happens for them, it's not as big of a deal, but the same concept still applies. You end up figuring out what's important to you and what's not, and having some of those things, again, thrown into stark relief. You have choices then about how you want to handle things, but you don't necessarily get your hand forced as far as I have to make a change. You're going to figure out where you're not being honest with yourself, and this is true with them too. So we see the Judgment card here. It is that I'm looking at myself from a much deeper perspective. It applies to both of you. It manifests differently once again because of the different places that you are on the path. So you're going to see where the healing hasn't quite happened with the Four of Swords, or where it hasn't been completed, because you've got different levels of that healing that are going to take place. So it's not just that you learn the lesson of your fears, around the fears of abandonment just once. It comes up in many forms and from many aspects. And then you get to see, sometimes you walk up on something in your own mind, which is essentially what happens here. And you see, I'm not being totally honest with myself about something. And now I have to figure out how I'm going to adjust it. Now, for you, it's kind of a big deal. So this is almost like comes together and looks like tower energy. For them, I feel like it's a smaller part of their life, but still kind of a big deal. Definitely that feeling of understanding what matters. It's like the 8 and 9 of Cups mixed together in this 9 of Cups. But having understood that there are several options here and having been reminded of that, also saying, you know what, I also, when you're forcing me to think about it, I'm starting to really realize what is important to me. It's the value of this Hermit card, and I'm glad we see it because it brings about a lot more balance and opportunity. So opportunity comes to you. It's been coming to you a lot during the course of this year. But having the ability to jump into all the things that are interesting to you is not always so easy. Sometimes it's time constraint. Sometimes it's that Two of Swords feeling that we saw come up all through January, where you got to figure out what you're going to spend your energy on because you don't have infinite amounts of energy. You're looking for this balance. That's something that everyone's been looking for. We've been seeing it coming up. You're in a great place here to find it, and you're likely to be successful with it. But you've got some, where am I going to put all these cards? You've got some decisions that still need to be made. So luckily I didn't have to take all those cards. I try to keep it reasonable so that you can kind of see what's there. But sometimes there are just so many that want to come out. The difficulty with the decisions, though, I think that's significant and probably karmic for me, not or for me bringing up yesterday that a decision looked like it was going to be a lot easier. But that's just the energy that I saw you in. This is March, and this is looking at, that you're coming toward a very important balance, and there are some things that you have to kind of work through. You already know you're going to be successful, and to a certain degree that you already have been, and this is the success. So you might say that success has been enabled by the fact that you've knocked down some walls of resistance within yourself. But you might also say that knocking down those walls of resistance is the success that enables you to have a different type of outlook on your life. And when you see things and learn lessons, it feels a little different than it used to. And you and your person are both experiencing this. I can't stress enough how much these are very much like messages that encompass the energy of the month for both of you. Although I'm curious to see a little bit more just kind of what to expect as far as behaviors, because we see here I'm going to try and go into my thinking cave, and I'm going to try not to do communication. And then down here I see, oh, I have to communicate. And yet all of this is going on where there's the shifting inside the self, a need to do something separate. So even if you're in communication with this person, there's a need for you both to have some alone time, some time away that allows you to really think through some things on your individual terms, okay? And that's where that hermit energy can happen. So it feels like there should be some opportunity for that, but I wouldn't rule out them being magnetized back and uncontrollably so. That doesn't feel like controlled energy, but I'm just curious to see what'll happen. So when we get into the extended, let's open it up a little bit more for behaviors that we're likely to see. First, let's look at your focus. So the link to the extended, I put it down below. I put the links to like the songs that I've been talking about lately. I put them on social media, but I also put the link down below in the video in case you guys are wondering, and if you're not with me on social media. Which, by the way, the links to my social media are there as well if you'd like to connect with me there. I like to hear from you. I read everything. I don't always necessarily get to respond to everything. But just so you know, that's where the links are. So if you want to see the extended, that's where you would go to see that. So far we've got, there's that 8 of Cups energy, the Ace of Pentacles, 8 of Cups. All right, this is you focusing on the journey and not the destination, but also having a huge change happen within you. And it's like you are in the bleachers watching this, or you're watching from above, but it isn't like judgment where you're watching from above and you're able to say, I'm not so sure about this. Like you're watching yourself become something. It's the only way I can describe this energy, but it has to do, it's like active, becoming and determining what is most important for you. It is still a little bit of that's finding the self-worth, but I feel like that comes in with the Eight of Cups. The Knight of Wands pushes you forward and gives you really, I guess, that momentum that you need. It comes off the line pretty quickly. Comes out of the gate pretty quickly. This is very active energy. But there's something new that you get to watch, and you don't have to do as much work. So you will be doing work at the same time, but you don't have to do as much work. A lot of the work has already been done for the bloom that you're going to see here. So we see a lot of blooming in the emotions. But we see that for you, I feel like that is also reflected here, where you get to watch yourself bloom and you get to trust and see a clearer version of your own emotions a little while, or a little more often. I think with your person, it's a little bit more fear-based, their response to that. But they haven't done the same types of work that you've done. So if I had gotten this Knight of Swords for them, I would say it is fear that makes them run away. But for you, I feel like it's more fear that makes you stop in your tracks, or just choose not to do something. So it's more a fear that creates a inaction, but you stop yourself before it becomes an issue. With the King of Swords here, it may benefit you to step back and look at the big picture, because you may be missing something that this fear is just covering up for you. Being afraid of something that you haven't quite gotten a full view of. I've got that. And it's in the way of you and your happiness. I think you're going to see through it relatively quickly, though. I feel like you see through it relatively quickly, and you're able to say, no, no, I do want to move toward that Nine of Cups that we saw over here. I do want to move toward that Ten of Pentacles, which is that's a very positive sort of feeling. So it's making a big change to your life. But what I didn't probably impress upon you enough was it is a positive change. So you've got a lot of positivity, opportunity, but it's like the opportunity is here, it's blooming. It's really not even a matter of what you do about it so much as how much you let it in. Do you let yourself have this perspective that shows what's happened in the past, allows you to take into consideration what's happened in the past, while at the same time being able to think about what the possibilities are for the future, because that's really what it's got to be. Things happen fast. The bloom happens quickly, but I don't feel like that's a bad thing. I feel like you are in a beautiful place to be able to perceive it, understand it, appreciate it for what it is. This is energy that we've seen you moving into. I just feel like make sure that when you have that fear, you step back and look at the big picture, because I feel like that's the thing that gets in your way. And that's the energy this month that gets in your way. Your focus on this point is just like land a plane in some place that you like, because you're flying into a beautiful place. You know, it's just pick a spot and start to enjoy it, but don't forget where you came from, because it'll help you actually to enjoy it and navigate it a little bit more easily. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the extended. Like I said, the link is down below. We're going to take a look at a little bit more of what we expect as far as behavior, given the energies that we see here. And so I will either see you there in the extended, or I'll see you again in tomorrow's reading.